So this is our training ring right here. Things to know about any boxing ring that you walk into, assessments you want to make. First thing, you're going to look at how big it is. Our ring is 16 feet. That means from turnbuckle to turnbuckle, you got 16 feet of space to use. Some rings are as small as 12 feet, which is half the area by square footage. Most competition rings are between 20 and 24 feet. Next thing to pay attention to when you walk into a new ring is the tension on the ropes. Our ropes have a moderate tension. They'll give a little bit, but you're not going to get stuck in them. Some ropes are real loose. The second you lean into them at all, that's your home until your opponent lets you off. Other ropes are like high tension cable wires, and you'll back up into them and they won't move an inch. And the final thing you're going to pay attention to when you walk into a new ring is what the floor feels like. This is what's called a slow surface. It means it's soft, it's padded, it's gonna chew up a lot of the force that I generate with my feet. It's gonna slow me down, and it's gonna tire my feet out quicker than if I was on a fast surface. These are usually wooden or concrete surfaces. Frequently, it'll just be a bunch of 2x8s over the canvas. You're gonna move real fast on a harder surface. Being able to move forward, backward, left, right, micro steps, closed side, open side angle is all important, but you need a framework and a context for that so that you can apply it to win a fight. So, when it comes to moving around the ring, this is a turf war. This is about controlling real estate, having ground to fall back into. We've already talked about how your first line of defense is distance, all right? Distance is something that you earn by your decision making in the ring. If I'm on the ropes like this, I can't problem solve with distance anymore. I'm in a horrible spot. The more ground at my back, the more options I have, and the less urgency I have for decision making. If I've got Tristan on the ropes over here, and he decides to be aggressive and start attacking, I can just use that distance, that ground to yield into. I don't have to stop him from attacking. I don't have to get off the tracks. The farther he gets me back, the more urgency, the more anxiety about my decision making mounts. So if he attacks me here, I've got 1 step, 2 steps, and if I either didn't disincentivize his attack or get around him, now I have way less options. Once I'm on the ropes like this, his straight punches are more effective because I can't move back with them, and his hooks are more effective because I'm more likely to be moving into them and compounding that force. Now, if I end up in the corner, I'm really in trouble. I can't move backwards anymore. I can't move side to side, and my only option is now to move through my opponent. This is like a head-on collision in a car because it's my force and his force meeting each other. If I try to step through him when he throws, bang, there's a lot of force there, okay? Now, this is an excellent opportunity to talk boxing strategy kind of in a microcosm here. The longer I box, the more I realize that boxing is about controlling your opponent, shutting down their tools, and disarming them from their weapons, all right? So what has Tristan taken away from me here? He's taken away my ability to move my feet, all right? I always like to use a silly video game analogy. Let's say that you're a boxer who is 120 points of boxing skill, and he's a boxer who's 100 points of boxing skill. In open space, I'm getting the better of him. But if I'm in the corner and 30 of my skill points here are in my ability to move my feet, all of a sudden he's created a 100 on 90 exchange. He's crafted an environment, he's crafted a situation where he can get the better of me. Now I can take away his tools as well. One of my favorite ways to get out of the corner is to cover his left hand. If I cover his left hand with my left hand, 1, I cheat him out of a tool that he can use to hit me. And 2, it means that I've either created an exit here or I know that he can only hit me with that right hand, which creates an exit on his open side for me to get out. Now, I said this was an excellent moment to talk about boxing strategy in a microcosm because he's not dumb. He's gonna make adjustments as well. So maybe the first time I cover this hand and he throws the 2 and I exit out of the corner. But he is pretty smart. So the second time I cover this hand and he throws the 6 instead, and he lets me step down and run into that shot, all right? Maybe I'm pretty clever too. So I think I'm gonna get a step ahead of this the third time around, and I'm gonna roll out the side, all right? He's smarter than me. He's thinking 2 steps ahead. He throws the 4, and when I go to pivot out, I run into that shot on the way through. This is how you want to think about strategy in boxing, where I make an adjustment, my opponent makes an adjustment. I make an adjustment, my opponent makes an adjustment. And if you can outthink them and get a couple steps ahead, you can craft a situation where you have a lot of success. So a lot of novice fighters, when they get somebody in the corner, they see red and they go really, really hard to finish that person. They don't recognize that their advantage here is the fact that they can still control distance. The only thing that Tristan can do that I can't do here is he can step out. So if he's here picking at me, bang, 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 and I go to hit him back, he can yield ground, all right? It's not in his interest to bury himself in my chest and start fighting at the middle distance here, because then he's equalized his advantage here. All right, now we're both just fighting in the middle distance. He has no advantage. Now, if he thinks that he can get the better of that situation, then he can take that gamble. But it's high risk. You know, you're fighting a fair fight at that point, instead of the fight that you want, which is one where you're leaning into the advantages that you've created. As an aside here, this is a really, really good opportunity to talk about one of the uncomfortable truths in any martial art, in boxing especially, and that's the fact that you reserve the right to solve any problem that comes your way with speed, power, and aggression. If he gets me into the corner here, I can choose to throw some big shots and try to spook him out of here. So maybe he's got me in the corner here and I throw a big, scary 6-3-6, bang, 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 and he gives me a little bit of ground, and that's my chance to either press my advantage and push him back, or he's giving me some breathing room for me to circle back around and get to an advantageous position. My other option here is to lean into the sportiness. Maybe he's got me in the corner here and I don't have the skills to get out of this situation, and I don't have the power to deter him and get out of this situation. So you'll see guys where he goes to attack and they'll tie up and they'll wait for the ref to come and save them. I would never ever fault somebody for trying to keep themselves safe in a fight, but this isn't really in the spirit of boxing as a martial art, which is about doing as much damage as you can and taking as little damage as you can. So how do we use all of this information about controlling real estate, about ground at our backs, and about bad positions to move around the ring? I always want to be moving towards open space and the center of the ring, and I always want to be circling away from the ropes and the turnbuckles. If you trace the path most traveled, not only traveled, but most traveled by two boxers who understand how to move around the ring, you're going to see almost a 4-leaf clover pattern emerge, as one boxer is consistently getting steered into the corner, finding a way out, circling around his opponent to reclaim open space and the center of the ring. Rinse and repeat. Though the clover pattern is the optimal way to move around the ring, it doesn't always play out that way. When one guy knows how to move around the ring and the other one doesn't, they end up doing what's called the ring general, where one person owns the center of the ring and the other person spends all their time with their backs against the ropes trying to find an inroads. You see this emerge a lot when one person is a big, powerful, immovable puncher. You look at somebody like George Foreman, all right? George Foreman spends most of his fights in control in the center of the ring, and he has people recognizing they can't move through him, so they must move around him. The final way that people move around the ring is called running the ropes. You're usually going to see this in local novice amateur fights. This is where neither person recognizes that they need to control the center of the ring, or they need to cut the person off and put them on the ropes, and they both just chase each other doing laps around the perimeter of the ring. This is very frustrating to watch as a coach, because if you have two guys who are side onto the ropes like this is a 50-50 exchange. All either of them has to do to take advantage of this is take an angle. And just like that, he's controlling the center of the ring, my back's to the rope, and he's improved his chances of winning tenfold here. So there are two situations in boxing when it's appropriate to yield ground as far as your macro position in the ring goes. One of them is when you need to draw somebody out of an advantageous position, and the other one is when you need to cut somebody off to stop them from regaining the center of the ring. Let's say that I'm a big, powerful puncher like a George Foreman. I'm certainly not, but let's pretend for the sake of this video. Tristan can't move through me. He's not going to be able to come in here with his offense and force me out of the center of the ring, all right? But he doesn't want to be using twice as much energy as me on the outside track running laps around me. He doesn't want to get stuck with me being the ring general and him being stuck on the ropes. If he does that, you'll see he's using all this energy to move around and circle around me, and I'm just making little micro adjustments in position. What he wants to do to give him the biggest opportunity to take the center of the ring is to draw me out of it. Like when you were in grade school playing capture the flag, somebody's puppy guarding or they're camping on the flag. You can't get that flag until you draw them off of it. One of the surest things that you can depend on across almost all combat sports is that if you yield ground, your opponent will take ground. So Tristan draws me from the center of the ring, he shakes me, and he ends up finding an exit where he can get back to the center of the ring. It's worth the risk for me to lose the center of the ring to try to get the reward of cornering him. And it's worth the risk for him to get cornered to get the center of the ring. And that's because it's in neither of our interests to stall. It's not in my interest to stand there and do nothing. We have to create action. We have to make things happen if either of us are going to find moments of success in this fight. The second situation in boxing when it's appropriate to yield ground is when somebody gets around my offense when they're in the corner. If I throw a big right hand and Tristan drop steps under it, he's got a clear path to the center of the ring. Now, what a lot of people end up doing is they panic in this moment and they try to chase. If I try to chase, all I'm doing is extending how long it's gonna take for him to get to the center of the ring, but he's still gonna get there. So if I try to chase him, he gets under my right hand and I follow, and he takes a big spiral path, but we end up in a 50-50 exchange in the center of the ring again. What's more appropriate instead of chasing him is gonna be to cut him off. So if we go back to that original position, Tristan gets under my right hand and then he freezes. The very first thing I want to do from here is think about defending the center of the ring. So I step back, he continues to circle around, and I make almost a little three-point turn off of the center of the ring, where I cut him off and then I re-engage. So if we see this more full speed, I throw the right hand, bang, out, right back in. Ideally, he gets out of one corner and ends up immediately in the adjacent corner. So, if you are always yielding ground to an opponent, whether it's because they have tenacious pressure or because they're a scary counterpuncher or because they're really aggressive, eventually you're gonna end up on the ropes. You don't want to stay there, and if you're just going side to side and they have tenacious pressure, as I said, they're going to keep you on the ropes. What you need to do is you need to use those angles we learned at the beginning of this video to find an exit. Be the matador, just like in a bullfight. If Tristan's on the ropes and I'm all the way out here, this is like the bull being 10 yards away from the matador. If he takes an angle now, that doesn't do him any good. I'm just gonna readjust my course, I'm gonna cut him off, and he still ends up on the ropes. He needs to wait for the moment when I commit myself, when there's no turning back from my attacks. Every single martial art has some concept of using your opponent's strength, momentum, power, size against them. In Aikido, it's really obvious. You have somebody running at you and you grab them, you flip them up over your head. In boxing, this is how we apply that principle. When I am committed to an attack, he can slip to that closed side angle. And he's got an elbow side. All of a sudden, he's in charge. When you're elbow side in a fight, you are briefly in charge. You get to decide if you want to go on the offensive or if you want to circle around to a better macro position in the ring. I go to throw my right hand, boom. That's his moment where he can circle around and get to a better place that he can fight out of. Some quick terminology that I use when I talk about position. Micro position is your position in relation to your opponent. Tristan can be in a great micro position right here. He's on the line. We're in a 50-50 exchange here. But he can be in a bad macro position, which is your position in the ring as a whole. So, as I decide how to maneuver and hunt for advantage around Tristan, I need to weigh my macro position as well as my micro position. If I want to improve my micro position, my relationship with where he is, I need to decide if it's more advantageous to go to my open side or to go to my closed side. If I go to my closed side, this is optimal. I've got him in a position where I've outmaneuvered him, and I'm still defending the center of the ring and steering him into the corner. If I decide to go to my open side angle here, this was the wrong decision. Now I'm nearer to the corner. He has a clear path to get to the center of the ring. Even though I might have set myself up for one quick good shot, he's not gonna stay there. He's gonna move around, and then I end up worse off for that decision making. I need to always weigh my macro position and my micro position as I'm maneuvering around the ring and around my opponent. You frequently hear coaches ask their athletes, what's the most important weapon in boxing? And what they're usually looking for is the jab. I know when I've asked my athletes in the past, I'm looking for the jab to be the answer. But I recently had an athlete say to me that the ring is the most important weapon in boxing. And I really would struggle to argue against that. I have beaten fighters that were much better than me on paper, much more experienced, much larger or faster than me, because I knew how to move around the ring and create the fight that I wanted. I could take tools away from them, I could take ground away from them, and I could equalize a lot of their successes with mine, even if they were the larger or the faster person. The ring is your greatest tool, especially as a short fighter. If you are fighting in a big open warehouse, you would really struggle to make any hay if you were giving up a lot of height and reach. In the ring, you can quickly find advantages by positioning yourself. My very first boxing coach was my father, and he always told me, if you're fighting a fair fight, you're fighting the wrong fight. And that's not to say that you are actively cheating to hunt for advantage, but it is to say that if you are not positioning yourself in places where you have a clear edge, then you are not fighting intelligently. You want to b-boy this? I love it. This is just like if you run into a catamount or a bear in the wild. All right, when you run into them, you want to let them know they can't come at you because they can't get around you. That's why you make yourself big. It's the same thing here. As I pressure Tristan backwards and he starts getting near the ropes, I don't want him to be able to take a tight angle to get around me. All right, so if he's here, I want to close off that space. Hand out, leg out. Can't get through it. And I've created an angle of attack for my left hand into his right side. Now, you might say, Coach, what if he moves to his left? Take the angle. Double big stance. Go ahead, work your way around me, Tristan. You may notice it is impossible for Tristan to get past me, and he can only be funneled into the corner of the ring.